I don't need a microphone, okay? Woo! I could just stand up here and cry for an hour. Wow. Ripley, West Virginia. Place that I tried to run away from, but Narcotics Anonymous had another story for me. Wow. Grateful to be here. I want to thank the committee for asking me, Erica, for texting me. When Narcotics Anonymous asks me to do something, I say yes, and I figure out how to make it happen. And that's something I learned here, and that's how I stay clean. And so, let's see where to begin. So growing up, I lived in Columbus, Ohio, and we lived in Reynoldsburg, kind of the school was like an average middle class school, and you know, my parents were they should have divorced a long time before they did, and it was pretty chaotic around the house, and I learned how to start avoiding confrontation early on. My dad would come home drunk, and so it was a pretty difficult situation to be in. You know, for a little kid, I just kind of like hid out under the couch type of stuff. And my mom, God bless her, finally mustered up enough courage. She was going blind. She mustered up enough courage to leave my dad, and we moved back to her hometown, Ripley, West Virginia. Right? And so I was 10 and moved here, and it was like culture shock, you know, like everybody was related here, and I was like the city kid, man. But see, what was happening at that time was the seeds of my addiction were starting to get some roots on them. Okay, and you know, I was taking things very personally. I was taking my parents' divorce very seriously. I was feeling very inadequate trying to fit in here. And so I started attracting people into my life that could help me feed that inadequacy and those shortcomings and things. And, you know, I was picked on a lot in middle school. I don't know, it's probably everybody's picked on a lot in middle school. But and so I started using food and cigarettes. And, you know, I loved the way they changed the way I felt. And, like, we were living at my aunt and uncle's house, and he had pornography magazines, you know, the Playboys back in the 90s. And you know, I found this thing I could run to and change the way I felt, you know, because life was difficult. You know, it was confusing. I was confused and lost. And then my sister was the first person I used with. She introduced me to using, and I remember it was like as soon as I used, I had found my purpose. You know, I knew I was going to use every day. There was no way out of it. I was going to use every day. This is what I did. I wanted to try every drug that I ever encountered, and the people I was hanging out with, all of a sudden, like, I was hanging out with the cool kids at school, and, you know, I felt like I'd found my calling. And so I was 16, just got my driver's license, and, you know, I told my mom, I'm going to this, like, you know, church sleepover type thing. And we ended up going out Cedar Lakes Road out here on Stats Mill Road, and we had a bottle of liquor. And I blacked out that night and wrecked the car, you know. And that's kind of like how the rest of my using would be. So I was able to go to school. I didn't really ever have any difficulty with school. I thought it was kind of easy, and somehow I just ended up in trade school and got a degree and started working with this company Because, not only did I get those shortcomings from my parents, I also got some assets from them too, right? And they helped shape my character, and one of those was like work ethic, and and I value that today. And I started working for this company and started making good money, and I started learning, but it wasn't enough to feed my addiction, because it was progressing too. And I started selling myself to credit card companies in my early 20s, and just massive amounts of credit debt. So, I feel like my armor's starting to come back on. I got to take it back off. So, when my using really got bad, it was 2007. It was October 1st, 2007. A group of friends and I were out in Parkersburg bowling, and I was driving. We were drinking and driving. And we came back to town. I dropped them off here in Ripley, and they wrecked, and all three of them died moments later, just after I had left them. And man, the using wasn't fun, after that. It was a really difficult time. And on the day of two of their funerals, on the way back from Charleston at the graveyard, I stopped out here in Fairplain, and I found a girl overdosed there. And I remember I walked in and I was talking to her like she was alive, I was in such shock from, there was just all this death around me. And I had really been I was really trying to stop using the hard drugs at that time, and that really fed it. And, things would get a lot worse from there. So, So fast forward a couple of years, and I had tried to get off drugs with substitution, counseling. I just couldn't stop, man. They had stopped. The effectiveness of the drugs had slowed, and had stopped covering that pain. And people were starting to cut me out. I met this girl, right? She lived in Barbersville. She was from up here, and I moved in with her, and it was a train wreck. I mean, we got evicted within 2 months. Cars were getting repossessed. Spent my 28th birthday in an abortion clinic. My dad. Last time I talked to my dad on my birthday, I was in the clinic in Charleston, and it's like things were just spiraling out of control, And then one of my last best friends died about a month before I got clean. And we had the same first and middle name. And so I'm going in, somehow I made it to the funeral home. I was, when we're using if we're going to show up or not to a funeral. And I showed up there, and it was like my name was on the placard, And you go in, and the pictures on the wall, it's got me in the pictures. And the friends that had passed away earlier, their families were there. It was a really dark time, The desperation was getting really bad. And at that time, I had been, when we got evicted, I moved in with my parents, right? I hadn't lived with them since I was 20. At that time, I was 28. And that didn't last very long. They're like, you got to go, We're retired. We're trying to enjoy our lives, And because I was that negativity, man. I was living in self-pity, that self-centered fear. And that's what I had to offer, So I still work for the same company. And the man I work for, he's like an angel. I asked him to fire me. I was like, I'm a liability to your company. And he said, if I fire you, you're going to die. Yeah. And I was living in his warehouse the last 6 months of using. And every night, after about 10 o'clock, I would go into that warehouse and scrap as much metal as I could to use the next day. And I would sleep about an hour and take the most horrendous shower, water just hurt. And I would be at the scrapyard at 8 a.m. and I would get enough money to pay the guy back from the day before for the crumb of dope and get another one from him for that day. Complete prisoner to the disease of addiction. And so on Good Friday 2013, my boss drove me to rehab, dropped me off. That's the last day I used. And I went in there, and I didn't know what to expect. Matter of fact, I was at this guy's house we were using that, and this guy was in there telling me about rehab and how awesome it was. We were getting loaded, man. He's like, "Oh, it's so cool. You just hang out, eat peanut butter sandwiches." And he's like, I was sleeping with the BRSs, man. It was so cool. That didn't sound so bad. So I go in there not knowing what to expect, And what was interesting, though, is that there was some undercover Narcotics Anonymous members in there, ready to deliver the message to a suffering addict. And, that's really where I learned the basics, the real basics. They told me that, they're like, look, you need to go to a meeting the day you get out of here. You need to get a sponsor. And it was just like 28 days of them telling me the same thing over and over again. I'm like, okay. And I wanted to use the whole time I was in there till about 3 days before I left. And I had a pocket full of money because I was getting people to send me cigarettes and snuff, and I was selling it in there and keeping the money, right? Because I was going to use one more time. That's all I knew how to do. I mean, that's what I'd done forever. That's how I had all my eggs in that basket. And so Gordon E., God bless him, man. Gordon delivered the simple suggestions here to me, and I ended up buying our literature and the other fellowship's literature. I spent all that money I had, and I got out of treatment, and I didn't really know. I thought AA sounded a lot easier, I was like, you like work the first 3 steps over coffee and shit. I'm like, so, and I love AA. Nothing against them. We're grateful for AA. We wouldn't be here without them. You know what I mean? And but so I was going to both fellowships, and but I felt something in NA. I felt something here that was different. And our camp out came up, and I went to the camp out, and after that night, I decided, you know what, I'm getting an NA sponsor. And I was pretty sure this was an intellectual society, I was like, these people are pretty smart. These are some big words, I was like, that motherfucker's the smartest guy in the room. So, and he was at every meeting I went to. I was going to 2 a day. Jason L was there, so I got Jason L as a sponsor, and where God put Jason L in my life, because we don't have that type of schedule today. I'm not going to 14 meetings, but we could then, and Nick and you guys started spoon feeding me this Narcotics Anonymous cultish language. I don't know. I feel like the steps work me. Like when people, I feel like I spent 5 years on the first cycle of steps. I feel like I read it, I study it, I write on it, and then life happens, and it teaches me what the step has to offer, you know? It teaches me what the step is, you know, because that's what this is about. It's about living the program, you know? And so the first step was pretty easy to work, you know? The pain, the unmanageability was very apparent, you know? And I feel like that's what then everything up to Narcotics Anonymous was all the evidence I needed that I needed this first step in my life. So when I was on step 2 was the Philadelphia World Convention. And Jason had 4 years on the Saturday night. There was like 5,000 people on the dance floor. And they're like, Jason L. from Huntington, got 4 years. That's my sponsor, dude. Yeah. And it was just amazing. There was tens of thousands of addicts from all over the world in this room. I've never experienced anything like that. I was trapped. I was trapped between Charleston and Ripley, you know, finding one more. All my free time in my life in my 20s was to find one more. You know, here we are, free, able to just go to Philadelphia. So that next morning, it was the Unity Day, Sunday. We're in this meeting, and they're doing these shout-outs to these prisons all over the world, you know, and this map's jumping. And it's just like, there's like jazz hands going on. You know? Wow, this is amazing. And my brother-in-law is calling over and over again. I'm like, what the heck? So I answer, Ryan, I got bad news, man. Your dad died last night. I'm like, oh, gosh. You know, it's like, it's your dad, man. It's your creator, part of your creation, you know. It was heavy. It was real heavy. But like, I had this minivan that my boss bought me, right? So I could work for him. This old Toyota minivan, it still runs. It's got like 350,000 miles on it. But we had 8 of us in that van, you know, and we were leaving and so we're leaving, and Jason's driving, and Nick's in there, and we're driving back, and I remember we're coming over the mountains there in Pennsylvania. And I remember looking out, and I had this feeling come over me that everything was going to be okay, you know? And it's like, I feel like that's when I really came to believe that I was going to be able to, like, get through life clean as long as I kept Narcotics Anonymous the first thing in my life, you know? And I felt surrounded. I felt supported. And I was able to go to my dad's funeral and be, and to serve the family. And what happened there was what's always available. There's people there using, and so I'm left with a choice. You know, I can go and get what I always had. You know what I mean? Or continue down this path. You know, and I was able. I said some stuff there. I have no idea what I said. You know, but I was able to speak from the heart. You know, and it was amazing. I said the Serenity Prayer with my family. You know, it was a real beautiful moment, and that was kind of like the second step to me. And so, let's see. I've lived with a lot of addicts in recovery. I think I've lived with a recovering addict in NA since I've been clean, including my wife. And that's been really cool to live with someone who's also all in on this program. And I don't know, I've been thinking about Tom a lot this weekend. I've heard a lot of people talk about him. Tom and I lived together for a while. He liked to roll his sleeves up like this on his flannels. So in his memory today, I've got my sleeves rolled up. And so I'm gonna just fast forward a little bit. So Jason was talking about the fourth step, and it's like everyone's love-hate relationship with the fourth step. You never know what someone's going to say about it. But what's apparent is that, like, I like this metaphor about the fourth step. Like, my internal world's unknown, and it's like when I do the fourth step, I'm going in and kind of mapping out my inner landscape, and finding out what it is that makes me who I am, And what's the good news is that most of us all have the similar traits, and you can definitely find someone in here that has similar experiences that can help you, stay clean through anything. And so the fourth step came down to, there was a couple of things that I felt like no one would understand, and I was, we worked the fourth step like there's no fifth step, is what it says. And but when you're writing it, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to share this with somebody. And I've been holding this and then, but the fifth step's the key to freedom too, And so me and Jason met, I think it was like 6 or 7 times. I mean, it was like all-day events too. It was, because I was trying to write as much as he did, and I thought this was an intellectual society. I mean, just for point of reference, I just did a fourth step on one piece of paper. You know what I mean? And it was just as effective because I got to the root, But I went out on a limb, and I believed in this program. I'd come to believe. And I shared that with Jason, and he looks back at me and says, yeah, me too. And I also realized I'd never had any semblance of a healthy relationship. And that was kind of devastating. That's something that, at that point, I just aimed my recovery at. 'Cause that's something I really wanted to recover, was a healthy relationship. A marriage, the family life was important values to me. And so I would have a whole lot more pain and a whole lot more trial and error, and before I would stop picking, And I remember I was working the sixth step, and I got myself in a pretty bad situation. This woman was saying that she was pregnant with my child, and I didn't want to be with her. You know what I mean? But I also avoid confrontation. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to go run away. And I'm sharing about in meetings, look, man, you need to go. Have a boundary, talk to this person. There's a way to navigate this, and I'm talking to everybody and writing about it. And how do you have a healthy relationship? What I knew came from misinformed people. I'm busted, man. My picker's broken. It's busted. So one of the most profound things I ever heard and was from Nick P. And he asked me, have I ever thought about not sleeping with people I didn't want to be with? I turned as red as he is right now, man. I've never considered that. No. And so that began me not picking. That began I got to try something different, And that's what I did. I started asking people with healthy relationships, what do you do? This is the seventh step to me. What makes a healthy relationship to you? Person that's been married for 25 years, XYZ, and I got a short list of things, and one of them was that people said they were best friends with their partner, and that they didn't sleep on the first date. Wow! Because I was told when two addicts meet each other, one's bringing a U-Haul. You know what I mean? And what I did in NA when I first got here was I would be in the meeting and I would see you across the meeting and I would think, man, sleeping with her would probably make me feel a lot better, you know? And trial and error, over and over again. Proved that to be a really painful lesson, you know? So I went abstinent, right? That's what we do here. Total abstinence. We're radical in NA, dude. This fucking total abstinence? Come on. There's all kinds of stuff out there. But I abstained and I started praying. 7th step, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. You know, I started praying for friendships. And they started happening, right? Because like when you engage in this process, dude, miraculous things start happening. That's something else Gordon told me. He said, when the head, the heart, and the hand get together, wonderful things happen, you know. And so I started meeting friends. I wasn't willing to jump into sexual relationships. And one of those was my wife. And I met her at an NA meeting. Now, she was in the treatment facility that I was not going to talk to the women from. Renaissance, they were off limits. Don't mess with the Renaissance girls, Ryan. So I married her, okay? But we started talking, and I was living with Tom. Me and Tom were living together, and Tom's like, now, you know she has a boyfriend, right? And I'm like, dude, I don't want nothing to do with that. I want just friendship, okay? Just friends. But we started talking, and we talked. The first time we talked was like 2 hours on the phone. She's like, I got to get off this. You know, it was just like instant chemistry. So like the God of my understanding works in like these really mysterious ways. I've heard people talking about it all weekend. And so Sarah and I, we start dating, and I take her home to meet my mom. You know, it's like, finally, I'm bringing home someone to my mother, you know what I mean, that man, I could actually see myself in a long-term relationship. And they start talking, and they're talking about, where'd you go to elementary school at, you know, and she tells my mom, that's where Ryan went to elementary school. And I was like, yeah, didn't we have a babysitter that picked us up in a big station wagon? And Sarah goes, Ruby? That was my babysitter. And so we're like, oh my God, we had the same babysitter 26 years ago. Right? And that's how God lets me know that I'm on the right path. Right? It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. And so Sarah and I, you know, we hit it off, and I know I look like I'm in my teenage years still, but we're almost 40, you know, so we want to start having a family. And so we're pregnant right now with our third child, our third girl. And another cool thing, so 3 years ago this weekend, we got married out here behind this oak tree. And John performed he signed the paperwork. He made it legal to make us one human, you know, to the taxpayers. But next weekend, I'm going to perform John and Amber's wedding, you know, on my new sponsor's clean date. And everything here is connected, man. Because the roots touch the branches here, man. We give and receive to each other in Narcotics Anonymous. It's a beautiful thing. So that's something that's changed. Like, Narcotics Anonymous turns me into someone I didn't even know I wanted to be. Right? I didn't know I wanted to perform marriages. Like, who wants to? I never thought, man, like when I was growing up, that was never something that I had dreamed about. But Narcotics Anonymous turned me into that person. Delmas was getting married, and he had a full wedding party, but he's like, I really want you to be in the wedding. Will you get ordained? And I'm like, okay. You know, it's like NA's asking. So it's like you just go on. So you just go. I went online, got the paperwork, right, to make it legal with the state. West Virginia's a little more difficult than other states for whatever reason. And performed that marriage, and it was amazing because these two people's lives were coming together, you know, and all this work and preparation had come to this very poignant moment, and I got to stand in that focal point of it, you know. So a couple months later, after his wedding, a guy I work with that I had wrote a resentment on needed someone to perform a marriage, and I was able to perform his marriage. You know, and I respected his traditions. It had nothing to do with me. It was just an act of service, you know. And so I've married like half the people on this side of the room. I'm looking for you, Nick. And a couple of years ago, my stepsister got married, and I was able to serve my family that way, and it was real beautiful. You know, I feel like my dad was real proud that day. That's the feeling I had that day. You know, because I talked to him one time after I got clean. I guess it was a God thing. I was driving down the road, and this voice was like, "You better call your dad." And I called him up, and he's like, "Come up this weekend." And it was a week before the convention, that week before he died. And I got up there, and we were sitting across the table, and that was the final conversation, you know. And at first I thought it wasn't what needed to be said, you know, but as the more I reflect on it, it was exactly what needed to be said, and there was a lot of resolution, you know. And so he broke a cycle in his life. He was really physically abused as a child, and he didn't pass that on. And now he was one of us, though, and now I'm breaking the cycle of addiction, and my kids haven't seen me use, you know. So that's something that motivates me to stay clean, you know. And I think it's important to find like things that draw me, that goals that draw me into the future, you know. So, wow, this is really cool. Last convention. So the transition. So last convention, I get here, and my current sponsor, been a friend. We're in the same sponsor family. I walk up to the dining hall, and he says, "Hey, how was the transition from 1 to 2 children?" And he's like looking at me like I've been there, and I know it's difficult, you know. And I'm like, whoa, you know, I got my armor on still, you know. I've got my masks on, but what that would lead to in that weekend is I asked them to sponsor me because, well, he's got 3 kids. No. That's one reason, you know, and so I got into some step work again after being like stagnant for a while, you know. Someone said it's a roller coaster here, and I feel like it's just like these seasons that we go through, you know. There's like a Grateful Dead song that talks about the heart. The heart has its reasons and seasons of its own, you know. And so, but I got back involved in the step work, and really, like, I've been working a cycle of steps on my relationships with my family, you know, because that's something that's, man, what is wrong with us where we resent the people we love the most, you know, like, what the heck? Because that was what was on my first 4-step, you know, was my family. And I've been finding a lot of peace with that. So, and I was wondering, I always wonder, like, why am I really doing this work, you know? And then there'll be people that come along, people that I sponsor, that are going through the same thing. And I'm like, I have a tool. Let's do this thing, you know. And yesterday, that tool that it didn't even have last convention came to life for someone else, you know. And that's what Narcotics Anonymous really is, man. It's this thing that passes through me, you know, to you. And what a gift! What a beautiful gift we have here. So I want to close with this. February of this year. So February of this year, the day I got my second vaccine shot, I go home and an ice storm hits that night, right? And I don't know if you've ever been around a tree when it's falling, but it activates something in the deepest parts of the limbic system, right? It's primal. It turns you instantly into an animal. Survival. That noise. And we live in the woods. It's like 2 hills, there's 50 yards, and 2 hills that go straight up like this, covered in trees. There's trees all around the house. One way in, one way out. It's a beautiful place. I love it. I've never moved from there. And the ice starts accumulating on the trees. And, you know, 2 hours in, the power's out. And all night, there's just giant trees raking through the dirt. And just, we're sitting in the living room like, it's pitch black, man. It's just, you're just waiting for one to come through the house, you know. The kids are asleep. I'm like, let's not wake them up, you know. Like, I think we're scared. What are we gonna do? Help them out? Like, God kept them asleep that night. And the next morning, man, I was really panicking. You know, I felt ill prepared. The road was covered in trees. We were trapped. I only live 10 minutes from Marshall University, but it's in the woods, you know, and it's like literally like from here to the road over there is where the city starts, you know. It's like city water, city everything. So we walk and make some phone calls, and I'm really distraught. And I always start the day with the JFT, and of course that day I didn't, you know. So I came back and I picked the JFT up and pick the day out, February 11th, right? This is what the JFT says. Faith. As we develop faith in our daily lives, we find that our higher power supplies us with strength and guidance that we need. Some of us come into recovery very frightened and insecure. We feel weak and alone. We're uncertain of our direction and don't know where to go for answers. We are told that if we find some faith in a power greater than ourselves, we will find security and guidance. We want that feeling of safety and strength. But faith doesn't come overnight. It takes time and effort to grow. The seed is planted when we ask our higher power for help and then acknowledge the source of our help when it comes. We nurture the tiny seed of faith with sunlight of our prayers each day. Our faith grows, a reward for living life on its own terms. One day we realize our faith has become like a huge spreading tree. It doesn't stop the storms of life, but we know that we are safe in its shelter. And just for today, I know that faith in my higher power will not calm the storms of life, but it will calm my heart. I will let my faith shelter me in times of trouble. So, that was actually the JFT for January 11th. It took me like a month to figure out. I was like, I read this JFT. It was today's JFT. But that's how God works. That's how the God that I've come to understand works. You know, He's got my back, man. He's got our back. I'm real grateful to have met each and every one of you guys. You know, every time I come to Ripley, it's like a transformation happens here. And I was feeling it this morning, man. The Friday night, we're all life's got us all worked up with our labels and our routines, and we come here and we shed our armor and shed our masks and shed our labels, and we're just these anonymous addicts for this weekend. These anonymous humans living and loving their lives. Man, it's a real beautiful thing. So I'm going to keep coming back here, and I hope each and every one of you do too. That's all I got. Thanks.